She had no business scrubbing marble floors in a billionaire's penthouse, not with a college degree. Not with hands that once held storybooks, not toilet brushes, but when life pulled the rug from beneath her feet, she fell into a job that was never meant to be her story. Have you ever looked around and asked yourself, how did I get here? Not because you made a mistake, but because life made a decision for you? This is what happened when a preschool teacher became a maid. And years later, the man she once loved looked into the eyes of her son and saw his own staring back. Before the world knew Graham Maddox as the CEO who rebuilt a fallen empire, before anyone cared about stock prices, app launches, or tech expos, there was only one thing that mattered to Alondra Reyes, keeping her mother alive and her dignity intact. Alondra never wanted to be a maid. She wanted crayons, not cleaning gloves. Lesson plans, not linen spray. A preschool classroom in Houston's Fifth Ward, that was the dream. She had a degree. She had passion. She had a vision. But the bills didn't care. Her mother's blood sugar didn't care. And her father's casket had closed without warning. By 24, Alondra had traded her laminated resume for mop buckets and baking soda. The apartment in Gulfton was always too hot. One window AC unit, 2 fans, and not a breeze in sight. Alondra sat at the kitchen table, staring at her empty planner. The pages used to be full. Classroom curriculums, observation notes, monthly learning goals. Now, clean for Mrs. Whitaker, 9 a.m. Shift at valet laundry, 4:30 p.m. Check on Mama's insulin. Her mom's cough echoed from the other room. Sharp, dry, heavy. Alondra closed the planner. Stood. No use dreaming when survival was screaming. Her cousin Daniela called with a quick favor. The agency is short today. A temporary fill-in gig. Real fancy building downtown. Pays triple. Alondra rolled her eyes. I have school files to sort. They need you for 5 hours, not 5 years. Come on, Prima. You need the check. She showed up to the Mosaic Towers in a hand-me-down black shirt, no makeup, and cracked sneakers. The doorman barely glanced at her. Suite 4302. Luxury leather, concrete walls, cold air that smelled like success. And silence. The tenant hadn't arrived yet. She vacuumed quietly, dusted the built-ins, and wiped spotless countertops. Again. Just as she gathered her supplies to leave, the front door opened. He walked in. Graham Maddox. She knew the name. The face. The folded company headline. Maddox Tech collapsed 3 months ago. He hadn't shaved. He didn't look at her, just nodded once. Alondra spoke first. Good evening. He said nothing, walked straight to his office room and closed the door. She blinked, collected her things, left quietly. But that wasn't the last time she'd see him. The agency called again. He requested you. What? Alondra asked, shocked. The guy, Maddox, said he preferred your work. Asked if you'd take a weekly contract. Alondra hesitated. Do you want it or not? I'll take it. For the next 6 weeks, she worked silently. He never asked her name. She never asked questions. He drank green tea. She wiped down the walls. The only sound was her soft cleaning playlist playing through her headphones. Until one Friday evening, rain fell hard. The streets flooded quickly. The agency texted, "Stay put, storm's too rough to commute." Alondra froze. She had nowhere to go, and the last bus had stopped running. She stayed on the balcony, hugging her bag, embarrassed. The door creaked open behind her. You'll catch a cold out there, Graham said. First full sentence in 6 weeks. She turned. Sorry. I didn't want to be in the way. You're not. You want some tea? She nodded. He poured 2 cups of jasmine green tea. They sat at the bar, the thunder soft in the background. I used to drink this when I pulled all-nighters building code, he said. I drank it during finals, she replied. They sipped. For the first time, they both smiled. They didn't talk about their pasts or where they'd been, or what they lost. They only sat with their present. Two people, alone in a high-rise, both trying not to fall apart. And outside, the storm quieted. Alondra never expected it to become a routine, but somehow it did. Every Thursday evening, she let herself into the penthouse quietly. The space always smelled like citrus cleaner and green tea. He was always in the office, usually in the same dark navy shirt, typing or staring at his screen like it held the answers to every mistake he ever made. He never said much. She didn't either. But something changed after that rainy night. He'd started leaving out a second cup, always the same mug, plain white, always warm when she arrived. She didn't ask if it was for her. She didn't need to. Sometimes she drank it. Sometimes she left it untouched. But it was always there. One night, as she wiped down the island, Graham spoke without looking up. "You're not like the others." She paused, cloth mid-swipe. "The others? The ones they send. They clean loud, complain, leave streaks. You don't—" Alondra gave a soft smile and returned to wiping. "I don't like repeating work." He didn't answer, but he didn't need to. That was his way of giving a compliment. Over time, silence became comfortable. He'd ask if she wanted tea. She'd nod. They'd sit for 10 minutes and sip quietly. No stories, no small talk, just stillness. But even in stillness, something began to build. It was never in the obvious things. It was in how he moved the lamp closer to her when she read during breaks. It was in how she folded his throw blanket even when he wasn't home. It was in how their eyes lingered too long when saying goodbye. By the third month, the night it happened felt less like a surprise and more like something they had slowly circled toward without ever saying it. He was sitting on the couch, eyes rimmed with exhaustion. She'd just finished the kitchen, hands damp from rinsing her gloves. She asked if he wanted her to lock up behind herself. He nodded, then paused. "Stay a minute." She hesitated in the hallway, her bag already over her shoulder. "Okay." She sat across from him, unsure why her heart had started racing. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked, voice low. She tilted her head. "Regret what?" "Choosing the safe road, playing by the rules, doing the right thing even when it's painful." Alondra thought for a moment. "I don't know if I ever had another choice." He looked at her like he understood that answer better than anyone ever could. "Me too," he whispered. The next words never came. There was no big moment, no passionate rush, no tension-filled confession. He leaned forward slowly, and she didn't move. Their lips met softly, hesitantly. No hunger, no demands. Just a long, aching kind of closeness that said, "I see you. I feel just as tired as you do." She didn't sleep over. He didn't ask her to. But when she walked out that night, her heart didn't feel empty. It felt fragile, like maybe, for a moment, she had been wanted. Not for service, not for help, not for obligation, but for who she was. She cleaned the penthouse one last time the following Thursday. He wasn't home, but a note sat on the counter. "Going to San Diego for a meeting. Back next week." She smiled. But the next week came, and he didn't. No text, no follow-up booking from the agency, no white mug waiting on the counter. The door code no longer worked. His name vanished from the front desk list. The office number she found on a company brochure rang once, then disconnected. Maddox Tech filed for bankruptcy 3 days later. She read the article twice, then a third time. The last paragraph said the founder's current whereabouts were unknown. Alondra stood in the middle of her studio apartment holding that paper and whispered, "You disappeared." Not an explanation, not even a goodbye. She didn't cry right away. She worked. She took more shifts. She stayed close to her mother. She focused on paying the rent and refilling prescriptions. But the ache followed her. Weeks later, her nausea started. It took her 3 tests to believe the faint pink line wasn't lying. She didn't tell anyone for a month, not even her mother. She didn't say his name out loud, not because she was angry, but because it hurt too much to remember someone who hadn't remembered her. When she finally did tell her mother, there was no judgment, just silence. Then, a soft nod. "We'll raise the child right," her mother said. And they did. Every ultrasound, Alondra went alone. Every item of baby clothes she folded with care. She wrote the name Mateo on a sticky note before he was born, drawn from a Spanish hymn she used to sing as a child. It meant gift of God. When he came into the world, her hands trembled holding him. He had Graham's eyes. Not just the color, the shape, the softness around the edges, the intensity when they focused. And every time he looked at her, it reminded her of that night, of a man who saw her for a moment and disappeared without even knowing what he left behind. She promised herself that Mateo would never feel abandoned. She would give him presents, even if he never got answers. 3 years passed. No updates, no accidental run-ins, no LinkedIn job changes, no press. The world had moved on from Graham Maddox. And so had she. Mostly. But every time her son laughed, every time he asked why other kids had dads at pickup and he didn't, a part of her heart cracked again. One afternoon, her friend Maribel sent her a voicemail. "You said you were looking for something better? I heard about a live-in job, big estate in Austin, full benefits, comes with room. They're looking for someone discreet and hard-working. Sound familiar?" Alondra looked over at Mateo playing with toy cars. She didn't think of Graham. She thought of rent, of preschool tuition, of her mother's new medication. "Send me the contact," she replied. That decision would change everything. She just didn't know it yet. The Northbridge estate sat at the end of a long, winding private road in Westlake Hills. It didn't look like a home. It looked like a monument. Stone pillars, black glass, immaculate lawns so well kept they could have been painted. Alondra's first morning there felt strange, not because of the silence, but because it felt too familiar. Luxury always smelled the same. Clean, cold, distant. The house manager, Mrs. Eaton, met her at the service entrance. Stern woman. Grey bun, tucked-in blouse. "You'll stay in the East Wing," she said without a smile. "You'll clean the main house 5 days a week. Never go upstairs unless requested. And no children in the residence. Ever." Alondra nodded, holding Mateo's hand tighter. "The quarters have 2 rooms and a kitchenette. Your son will remain there during working hours. Is that understood?" "Yes, ma'am." They didn't ask her much. She didn't offer much. The salary was better than anything she'd seen. Healthcare included. Food stipend. 1-year contract. She signed without hesitation. By week 3, she had learned the layout of the estate like the back of her hand. The owner hadn't been seen once. Mrs. Eaton said he traveled constantly. "Tech people," she muttered once. "Always running." Alondra's shifts were quiet. She played soft Spanish music through one earbud while dusting shelves lined with unread books. The kitchen was her favorite room, sleek and modern, but still warm. She took her time there. It reminded her of the penthouse, of simpler heartbreaks. Mateo was good, better than most kids his age. He stayed in their wing, colored on recycled paper, and watched animal videos on a donated tablet. He never cried when she left for the main house, just said, "Be careful, Mama," and went back to his world. Then, one Thursday night, the door opened. Not the back door, the front. It was nearly 9 p.m., and Alondra had just finished tidying the foyer. She stood frozen, holding a box of polish wipes, as footsteps echoed across the marble. He turned the corner, and the air fell out of her lungs. Graham. Thinner, tired, but still him. His hair was slightly longer, his posture less rigid, but the face was exactly as she remembered. She didn't say his name. She couldn't. He stopped in his tracks, his eyes locked on hers. Time didn't slow, it stopped. "Alondra?" he asked, voice hoarse. She dropped the box in her hand. It hit the floor with a dull thud. His eyes searched her. She could see the shock ripple through him. Then the confusion. Then the memory. She found her voice. Barely. "Hi." He didn't smile. Didn't frown. He just stared. Then he nodded once and walked past her toward the back hallway. She didn't move. Didn't breathe. Just watched the man who vanished now walk by like a stranger in her new life. That night, Matteo was already asleep when she returned to their quarters. She sat on the edge of her cot, shaking. What were the odds? What were the chances? And why did it still hurt? The next morning, she saw him briefly in the dining room, speaking with Mrs. Eaton. He didn't look her way. She took that as her cue to remain invisible. She had done it before. She would do it again. But the ache in her chest had returned, full force. By Saturday, she started asking herself if she should resign. But she needed this job. For Matteo. For her mother's insurance. The next evening, she was scrubbing the stair railings when she felt someone watching. She looked up. Graham stood at the landing, arms crossed. "How long have you been here?" he asked. She straightened, wary. 3 weeks, he nodded. "You live on site?" "Yes." "With your son?" Her throat tightened. "Yes." He nodded again, slower this time. "How old is he?" She didn't answer right away. 3. His mouth parted slightly, but he didn't speak again. He just nodded one final time and walked off. She felt her stomach twist. Not yet. Don't do this here. 2 days passed. Nothing more was said. Until Saturday morning. She had gone to refill the mop water. Matteo had snuck into the hallway, chasing his little blue ball, laughing to himself. The ball rolled straight into the main hallway. Matteo ran after it, and collided into the legs of a man standing near the bookshelf. Alondra returned seconds later to see Graham kneeling. Matteo's small hand rested on Graham's arm. She froze. So did Graham. He looked into the boy's face, and she saw it happen. Recognition. Graham's body stilled. His breath caught, and Alondra saw it in his expression, like a mirror had shattered inside him. He crouched, his eyes level with Matteo's. "What's your name?" he asked softly. "Matteo," the boy grinned. "Mama calls me Tet." "Who's your mama?" "Alondra." His mouth opened slightly. Then he looked up. She was standing there, frozen, speechless. Matteo saw her and waved. "Mama, I found my ball." But she didn't respond. Graham stood slowly, turning to face her. The boy didn't matter anymore. Only her. "Why didn't you tell me?" His voice wasn't angry. It was breathless, raw. Her arms folded instinctively, protective. "Small. You left," she said. "You didn't say goodbye. You didn't leave a number. You just vanished." He took a step forward. "I didn't know. They shut my company down in 72 hours. Everything was frozen, my number, my accounts. I didn't even get my last paycheck." "I didn't know that," she said quietly. "I didn't know you were pregnant." Silence. She swallowed hard. "I didn't think you wanted to know. You made no effort. I didn't know there was something to find." He looked at Matteo again, who had already bounced away, chasing shadows and imagination. "I would have come back," he whispered. "If I had known." Tears filled her eyes, but she blinked them back. "You came back now." They stood there, 2 people with broken history and no script. Neither moved. Neither knew what to say. And Matteo's laughter echoed down the hallway, innocent and unbothered. Graham looked shaken, like the ground beneath him was no longer trustworthy. He cleared his throat. "I'd like to see him again, if that's okay." Alondra didn't answer right away. Then finally, "On my terms," he nodded. "Okay." That night, she lay beside her son, watching him breathe. And for the first time in 3 years, she didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But she knew everything had changed. They didn't talk for 3 days. Alondra did her work as if nothing had happened. She scrubbed countertops, polished floors, folded towels. The routine grounded her. It gave her something to control. But her mind wasn't quiet. Every corner of the estate whispered now. Every room reminded her that Graham was somewhere nearby, thinking, processing, remembering. And Matteo? He asked one question that nearly broke her. "Mama, why does the man with the blue shirt look like me?" She had no answer. Just a kiss on his forehead and a promise of story time. Graham, for his part, respected her space. He didn't push, didn't corner her, but he was around. Quiet, watchful, changed. On Thursday evening, she finished wiping down the breakfast nook and turned to find him standing behind her, holding 2 mugs. One was plain white. Her fingers twitched. "I didn't know if you still liked jasmine," he said. She hesitated, then reached for the mug and held it gently. "I didn't forget," he added. She took a slow sip. Warm, familiar. Too familiar. They sat across from each other at the long kitchen island, not touching, not rushing. "I've been trying to think of what to say," Graham finally admitted. "But I think anything I say will sound too late." Alondra didn't respond. She watched the steam rise between them. "I never wanted to disappear." "But you did," she said, voice low. "And I had to figure everything out alone. There was no one to call, no one to lean on." "I know." "No, you don't," she snapped, the anger finally rising. "You don't know what it's like to have a baby growing inside you while you're scrubbing apartments just to keep food on the table. You don't know what it's like to explain to your son why he doesn't have a dad. So don't tell me you know." He nodded. Quiet. Let her speak. Because there was nothing he could say to erase any of it. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he said after a beat. "And I'm not asking for permission." She looked at him, tired, guarded. "Then what are you asking for?" "A chance to show up." She stared at him longer than she meant to. His eyes were softer, still sharp, but vulnerable in a way she hadn't seen before. Matteo's eyes. She nodded once. "Okay," she said. "But no overstepping." "Of course. No confusion." "None. And don't say you'll show up unless you do." He met her eyes. "I will." The first visit was short. Matteo sat beside Graham on the front steps, holding a bag of cheddar crackers and a juice pouch. He talked about animals, tigers mostly. Graham listened, nodded, smiled. Alondra stayed back, watching from the kitchen window. Her hands shook more than she expected. Graham didn't try to be his dad. He didn't force hugs. He just listened. On the second visit, he brought a coloring book. Matteo didn't care much about staying in the lines, but he liked when Graham pointed out which colors he should try. By the fourth visit, Matteo asked if he could ride in Graham's car, just to the mailbox and back. Graham checked with Alondra first. She nodded slowly. The next day, Matteo told everyone in the staff lounge, "The man who looks like me can drive really fast." Alondra nearly choked on her water. Mrs. Eaton shot her a look but didn't say anything. By week 3, the quiet rhythm returned, but not the kind that ached. This one hummed, like something being rebuilt with gentle hands. Alondra didn't smile often around Graham, but when she did, he noticed. He never said it out loud, but her smile carried more weight now. One night, after Matteo had gone to bed, Graham knocked gently on the doorframe of the east wing hallway. She was folding laundry. He leaned on the edge, not stepping in. "Does he like school?" "He does," she said without looking up. "They're doing the alphabet this week." "Has he asked about me?" She paused. "Yes, but I didn't give him any promises. I wouldn't expect you to." He waited a second longer, then turned to leave. "Graham?" she called. He turned back. "Thank you for not rushing this." He gave a soft nod. "I missed 3 years. I won't mess up the next 3. That night, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She didn't want to admit it, but a part of her still remembered what it felt like to sit beside him in that penthouse, tea between them, silence in the air, and peace in her chest. She missed that part, not him, just that peace. Maybe both. The next weekend, he cooked dinner. Alondra didn't say yes right away. It took 3 days and Matteo's constant begging for spaghetti night to push her over the edge. "Fine, but I'm bringing the juice boxes," she said. Graham laughed. "Deal." She hadn't heard him laugh like that since before the fall. Dinner was quiet, but warm. Graham cooked too much pasta. Matteo spilled sauce on his shirt. Alondra wiped it with a smile she didn't bother to hide. They ate outside under the patio lights. Matteo sang a little made-up song about noodles and tigers. Graham poured Alondra a glass of sparkling water and sat across from her. "This is the best night I've had in years," he said simply. She looked down. He didn't reach for her hand, didn't lean in, but he didn't need to. The air between them was full of something heavier than memory. It was presence. It was effort. It was new. Have you ever tried to rebuild trust with someone who left you behind? What would you do if the father of your child suddenly wanted to return? Drop a comment below. I want to hear your thoughts. And if this story is keeping your heart invested, go ahead and hit that like button, share it with someone, and subscribe so you never miss the next part. The storm had been building all afternoon. Thick grey clouds dragged themselves across the Austin skyline, stubborn and slow. The kind that promised rain but waited until dark to deliver it. Alondra finished wiping down the granite counter and glanced at the time. 6:42 p.m. She hadn't seen Graham all day. The door to his study was closed. Lights off. The whole place felt like it was holding its breath. She picked up her keys and stepped into the hallway. Thunder cracked somewhere in the distance. She paused by the balcony. The wind had picked up. Fast. Violent. Her phone buzzed. Transit routes suspended due to flash flooding. All service halted until further notice. Alondra stared at the screen. No buses, no ride-shares, no way home. She let out a shaky sigh, slipped her phone back into her bag, and sat on the bench near the balcony door. She wasn't going to ask for help. Not from him. She'd stay quiet. Wait out the storm. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. Then the sound of footsteps behind her. "You're still here?" Graham's voice broke the silence. She stood quickly. "I didn't want to be in the way. The storm. There's no way to get back right now." He nodded. "You could have said something. I figured I'd just stay out of the way." He didn't respond for a second. "Then, did you eat?" She shook her head. "Come on." She followed him to the kitchen. He opened the fridge, pulled out a container of leftover soup, and set it on the stove. They didn't speak as it warmed. Alondra sat on a stool, watching him. There was a gentleness in his movements that hadn't been there before. No sharp turns. No clipped gestures. Just quiet motion. He poured the soup into 2 bowls and slid one in front of her. She murmured a thank you. They ate slowly. Every so often, the thunder rumbled, but the house stayed still. When she finished, she wiped her hands and stood. "I should give you space. You're not in the way," he said gently. She hesitated. "I mean it." She sat again. A minute passed, then another, until finally he spoke. "I had a company once, built it from scratch, gave it everything." "I know," she said softly. "I remember. I lost it all. In less than 4 days. I read about the shutdown. I didn't even get to fire anyone in person. They found out when their login screens locked them out." He ran a hand over his jaw. "My dad left when I was 6. Never came back. And all I ever told myself was, I'll never do that to someone else." Alondra looked at him. "That's not the man I saw," she said. He turned his head toward her. "You were kind. You were present. You were tired, but you noticed me." He let out a bitter laugh. "Yeah, well, I broke the one rule I swore I never would." They sat in the silence, surrounded by storm and stillness. Then Graham spoke again, softer this time. "You ever feel like life gives you a brief second to feel whole, and then yanks it away?" She blinked hard. All the time. They didn't talk after that. Not with words. But something shifted. He moved closer, and she didn't lean away. His hand touched hers. Hesitant, slow. She didn't flinch. She turned her palm upward. Fingers threaded together. He watched her face. She searched his eyes, and whatever had been waiting between them, tension, understanding, the quiet ache of two people who didn't know how to name what they were feeling, finally stopped waiting. He leaned in. Their lips met, softly, carefully. He didn't rush. She didn't pull away. It was warm and uncertain and honest. His hand cupped her cheek. She closed her eyes, and for one moment, neither of them felt broken. They weren't people with regrets. They were just two tired souls who had found each other in a storm. He kissed her again, deeper this time, but still tender. They didn't speak. There was nothing to explain. She stayed until the rain stopped. He walked her to the guest room down the hall, offered her clean towels, bottled water. When he opened the door and handed her the blankets, their hands brushed. She looked up at him, and he kissed her again, not out of habit, not out of pressure, but because he didn't want the night to end without knowing what it felt like to hold something real. She didn't ask him to stay. He didn't try. She slept in that room alone, but she didn't feel alone. For the first time in years, she felt seen. The sun rose grey the next morning, heavy with clouds. Still and quiet. Alondra left the guest room before 7 a.m. The penthouse was silent. No clinking dishes, no keyboard taps, no movement behind the office door. She made herself a cup of tea, drank it slowly, then cleaned the kitchen again, even though it didn't need it. When she left that morning, she expected to see him the following week. She expected him to call, or leave another mug, or something. But Thursday came, and he wasn't home. Friday came. Still no word. She called the agency to confirm the next cleaning slot. They said the client had cancelled all future bookings. Alondra felt a strange pull in her chest, like the air had turned colder, even though it was spring. She waited another day. Then she walked past the mosaic towers downtown, heart racing. Graham's name was no longer listed at the front desk. "Mr. Maddox moved out last week," the doorman said, barely glancing up. She stood there on the marble floor, trying to feel grounded. But everything beneath her felt like water. She tried calling the number she'd seen on his company folder once. Disconnected. She searched his name online. News headlines flooded her screen. Maddox tech collapse triggers investor lawsuits. Graham Maddox goes dark amid company shutdown. No comment from former CEO. She scrolled until her eyes blurred. No sightings, no statements, no trail. He was gone. Not just physically. Gone in the kind of way you don't recover from. She sat on her mattress that night and tried not to cry. But grief doesn't wait for permission, and heartbreak never asks if you're ready. The tears came anyway. She didn't cry because she loved him, at least not the way love is usually measured. She cried because something quiet and good had grown between them, and now it had been ripped away before she could even understand what it was. A week passed, then another, then came the nausea. At first, she blamed stress. She skipped meals, slept less. Her mother noticed. "Mija, are you okay?" Alondra nodded. "Just tired." But deep down, something felt different. A stillness in her body, a heaviness behind her ribs. She took the test on a Tuesday, in the back restroom of a grocery store, not the way she imagined discovering she was going to be a mother. The faint pink line appeared before the 2-minute mark. She sat on the closed toilet lid, staring at the result in disbelief. The world didn't spin. It stopped. "I'm pregnant," she whispered to the empty stall. She waited for panic to hit her. But what arrived first was grief, not for herself, but for the child growing inside her, who would never know where they came from. She considered calling him, emailing, reaching out somehow. But what would she say? "You disappeared, and now I'm holding what you left behind." And I don't even know if you'd care. She never told him. She didn't have the chance, because he had vanished completely into the folds of corporate collapse, PR silence, and vanished records. So she made her decision. She would raise the baby alone. No games, no waiting, no expectations, just survival. Again, she moved to San Antonio to be closer to her cousin Daniela, found a cheap 2-bedroom apartment above a closed hair salon, got a part-time job at a preschool for toddlers. When she told her mother, the older woman only took her hands and kissed her knuckles. God doesn't give us children without giving us the strength to raise them. And so, Alondra raised him. She picked the name Mateo from a hymn she used to sing as a girl. It meant gift of God. He arrived on a warm April afternoon. The labor was long, hard. She screamed into her cousin's hands and wept when she first heard his cry. When they placed him in her arms, she stared at his face for what felt like forever. He had her lips, her nose, but his eyes. His eyes belonged to a man who had once poured her tea while the rain beat against a high-rise window. Sharp, gentle, watching. She wept again, not because she was sad, but because he was beautiful, and she had no one to show him to. The first year was the hardest. Her shifts were inconsistent. Bills piled. Her mother's insulin became more expensive. Formula alone nearly broke her budget. But Alondra didn't falter. She worked, saved, cooked in bulk, bought clothes second-hand, learned to patch holes and fix zippers. She told Mateo bedtime stories about kings and forests and magic doors. Never about CEOs. Never about disappearing acts. By the time he turned 3, he could say most of the alphabet, pour his own, cereal, and tell when his mama was sad, just by the way she folded the laundry. He'd say, "Come sit with me, mama." And she would. She built them a world of peace. Quiet, small, but theirs. She didn't date. Didn't party. Didn't scroll through social media looking for Graham. She had long let go of needing closure. But there were nights when she'd catch Mateo mid-laugh, see the light in his eyes, and something sharp would cut through her chest. He'll never know how much he missed. Until one day, that changed. The delivery room was quiet after the chaos. Just the steady beep of monitors. The distant shuffle of nurses. The slow, rhythmic breaths of a new life resting on Alondra's chest. Her arms trembled as they held him. He was warm, still, barely the size of a loaf of bread, wrapped in a soft blue blanket with a white hat sliding over his small ears. She stared at him in silence, not crying, not speaking, just watching. Mateo. His lashes were long, already curling slightly at the tips. His hands were tight fists, resting against his cheek like he was still dreaming. Alondra inhaled sharply, as if breathing in the reality. This was her child. Hers. Not an accident. Not a burden. A gift. Tears filled her eyes, but she blinked them away. There was no room for sadness here. Not now. Not today. The nurse came by and gently checked the monitor. "He's perfect," she whispered. Alondra nodded, still staring. "He looks like someone I used to know. Is the father coming?" The nurse asked without judgment. Alondra's throat tightened. "No," she said quietly. The nurse said nothing more. She just touched her shoulder once before walking away. Later that evening, Alondra held Mateo in one arm and signed hospital forms with the other. Father's name, left blank. She stared at the empty space for a long time, then turned the page. Bringing Mateo home was nothing like the books described. There were no glowing moments, no picture-perfect crib setups, just second-hand blankets, a cracked plastic bottle warmer, and a bassinet borrowed from her cousin's neighbor. But he slept. He smiled in his sleep sometimes, and that was enough. She lived in a small unit above an old Dominican hair salon. The walls were thin, the air conditioner rattled. The neighbors played dominoes on the curb until 2 a.m., but the rent was low. The window let in afternoon sun. And there was a tree outside that Matteo liked to stare at from his blanket nest on the floor. Alondra didn't complain. She woke up every 2 hours, pumped milk, boiled water, rocked him for hours when he wouldn't stop crying. She lost sleep, lost weight, lost time, but never once did she lose her patience with him. When he was 6 months old, he started laughing. Big belly laughs. Every single time she said, "Where's the tiger?" and tickled his belly. It became their game, over and over. He'd kick his feet, drool on his shirt, and squeal in delight. And for a while, that became her favorite sound. By his first birthday, Matteo had a small but steady routine. Alondra worked part-time at a neighborhood preschool where the director, Miss Delaney, let her bring him along in the mornings. He stayed in the toddler room while she worked in the pre-K group. They walked home together every afternoon, him on her hip, his fingers wrapped around her hoodie string. On weekends, she took him to the library, not because he could read, but because he loved crawling between the shelves and pulling out books with bright animal pictures. Everywhere they went, people noticed the resemblance. "Oh, those eyes. He got those from his dad, huh?" Alondra would smile politely. "Yeah, something like that." Money was tight. Formula was expensive. Diapers were worse. But Alondra made it work. She meal prepped on Sundays, sold her old textbooks online, tutored neighborhood kids in phonics and handwriting. Her mother's health had improved slightly, but the medical bills still hovered over them like a weight. And yet, somehow, she never let Matteo feel the tension. He had clean clothes, warm food, bedtime stories. He had hugs and kisses and songs sung in both English and Spanish. He had a mama who showed up every single day, even when she felt like disappearing. When Matteo turned 2, he started asking about daddies. He heard it from the other kids at preschool. One morning, while eating oatmeal and pointing to a cartoon family on his cereal box, he asked, "Mama, where's my daddy?" Alondra froze. She didn't panic. She didn't lie. She lifted him onto her lap and ran a hand down his back. "Your daddy lives somewhere else," she said. "But you know what? You have me, and I love you double." Matteo didn't cry. He didn't even ask again that day. He just leaned into her chest and said, "Okay, Mama." But later that night, after he fell asleep, she sat in the kitchen and stared at the wall for almost an hour. She didn't hate Graham. She couldn't. Hatred required presence, and he had given her only absence. Instead, she felt something heavier. The silence he left behind had forced her to grow, to harden, to carry everything alone. But she also knew that silence gave her Matteo, and that made her grateful, even if it hurt. When Matteo turned 3, he started speaking in full sentences, telling stories about imaginary tigers and boats in the sky. He was bright, kind, observant, too observant. Sometimes he would say things like, "Mama, you look sad behind your smile," or, "Is your heart tired today?" And she'd hug him so tightly it made him giggle. Alondra had learned to live with unanswered questions. But one part of her, a small buried part, still wondered, where was Graham? Was he still in Texas? Had he moved on? Did he ever think about that night, or the child born from it? She never said it aloud, but the ache never left, not completely. Until one day, an unexpected phone call planted a new path in her life. Monday mornings always started the same. Oatmeal for Matteo, a call to her mom, a quick prayer over the week's grocery list. Alondra didn't complain. She had long since made peace with her life. She had built a rhythm with her son, one rooted in small joys and quiet strength. There was no man knocking at her door, no fairy tale comeback, just diapers, bills, and bedtime stories. And she was okay with that, until Daniela called. "I heard something," her cousin said, voice low like it was state business. "Something what?" Alondra replied, wiping Matteo's mouth at the table. "There's this place, a big estate just outside Austin, Northbridge. They need a live-in housekeeper. Full-time, benefits, medical. They even cover child living expenses." Alondra's heart skipped. For real? For real. My friend Maritza knows the estate manager, says they're desperate for someone reliable, quiet, clean record, no drama. Alondra hesitated. Matteo drummed on the table with his spoon. What's the catch? It's a long commute if you don't live on site. But if you live in, you get your own wing, 2 rooms, utilities paid. They even allow 1 child. Alondra's eyes dropped to her son. Send me the info. 2 weeks later, she stood at the gate of the Northbridge estate. She had never seen anything like it. Tall iron gates, a long winding driveway flanked by cypress trees. A property so wide you couldn't see the house from the road. The main building looked like a museum, stone, glass and money. She held Matteo's hand tightly, trying to keep her shoulders relaxed. Mrs. Eaton, the estate manager, was already waiting at the service entrance. "You're punctual," she said, as if it was a rare trait. "Yes, ma'am." "You come recommended." Alondra didn't answer. Mrs. Eaton eyed her outfit, clipboard in hand. "You understand, the child is not allowed in the main house during working hours." "Yes, ma'am." "And you'll keep to the east wing, unless asked otherwise." "Understood." Mrs. Eaton gave a tight nod. "Come with me." They toured the quarters. 2 rooms, a clean bathroom, a small kitchenette. More space than she'd had in 3 years. Matteo immediately walked toward the window and pointed at the fountain outside. "Can I touch the fish?" Alondra scooped him up. "Not yet." Mrs. Eaton almost smiled. Almost. The terms were clear. Cleaning, cooking, light organizing. 5 days a week. No personal interference. The pay? More than Alondra had ever seen on a single check. Health insurance included. Stability. She signed the contract that afternoon. By the end of the first week, she knew the house like a map. The owner had still not appeared. She asked Mrs. Eaton once in passing who lived there. "Tech person," she replied vaguely. "Always traveling." Alondra didn't push. She had learned a long time ago not to ask questions in rich people's homes. The estate had a rhythm: morning cleaning, linen changes, polishing railings, refreshing guest bathrooms that were never used. Matteo stayed in the east wing, coloring quietly, his tablet playing animal songs on low volume. He never wandered. He knew the rules. Alondra made sure he was fed, safe, busy. She kept her focus on the job. One evening she stood in the main kitchen, rearranging the spice rack. The sun dipped low through the back window, casting long amber streaks across the tiled floor. She felt calm, settled. She didn't think of Graham anymore, not often, just sometimes, when Matteo tilted his head the same way, or blinked slowly when he was tired, or stared into space with those quiet grey eyes. Still, she'd let the memories rest, until that Thursday night. The sound of the front door unlocking froze her hands. She turned. Footsteps. Heavy, familiar. A coat thrown on the back chair. Keys dropped in the bowl near the archway. She stepped forward, heart lodged in her throat. Then he walked in. Graham. Older, leaner. But him. He didn't see her at first. He turned toward the living room, then paused. Looked again. Their eyes locked. He stopped breathing. So did she. Alondra? Her name didn't sound like a greeting. It sounded like a memory he didn't know he'd lost. She stood motionless, sponge still in hand. "Hi," she whispered. He stepped closer. "Just an inch." "You work here?" She nodded once. Silence stretched between them. Graham's jaw clenched slightly. His eyes darted, not suspicious, just rattled. She forced herself to stay composed. "Welcome home," she said softly, then turned back to the counter. She didn't sleep that night. She lay beside Matteo, watching his chest rise and fall. The weight of what she had kept hidden pressed down like a second blanket. What now? Would he fire her? Would he ask questions? Would he remember what they shared, or pretend it never happened? The questions clawed at her mind. But in the morning, nothing happened. No knock, no confrontation, no request to leave. Just another silent Thursday, and a boy still dreaming in the next room. Graham didn't sleep much after seeing her. Alondra. The name echoed louder than any meeting reminder or inbox ping. He sat alone in the study that night, the same study that used to give him peace. The walls felt smaller now. The silence stretched tighter. She was here, in his home. She had said nothing else. No questions, no explanations. Just, welcome home. He didn't know what to make of it. The last time he saw her, she was walking out of his penthouse with her bag over her shoulder, a quiet smile still playing on her lips. He thought he'd see her again the following week. But the world had crumbled before he got the chance. And now, 3 years later, she was wiping down his counters again, like time had folded in on itself. He didn't ask Mrs. Eaton anything. He didn't want questions that led to truths he wasn't ready to face, but he couldn't stop thinking about it. About her. About that night. Alondra kept her routine airtight. She avoided him when she could, cleaned early, stayed near the south rooms when she knew he was upstairs, took her breaks only when Mateo was napping or preoccupied in the east wing. She was careful and quiet, but Graham noticed things. The folded dish towels in the shape of cranes, just like she used to leave at the penthouse. The faint scent of jasmine in the linen closet. The warmth in the kitchen that hadn't been there since the last time she stood near the stove. On the third day, he saw her through the glass door, seated under the patio pergola with a small plastic lunchbox beside her. She looked tired but steady. Her eyes followed the trees swaying in the breeze. He wanted to walk out, say something, but he didn't. Instead, he turned away. That evening, he knocked gently on the doorframe of the kitchen as she loaded dishes. She didn't look up. "Hi," he said softly. She gave a nod. "I wasn't expecting to see you here," he continued. "I wasn't expecting to end up here either," she replied, still not meeting his eyes. Graham cleared his throat. "How long have you been working for Northbridge?" 3 weeks. He paused. "And before that?" "Preschool assistant, part-time." Another pause. "I didn't mean to disrupt anything by coming back." Alondra finally looked up. Her face was unreadable. "This is your house, Graham. You're not the one disrupting anything." He took a slow step closer. "Do you live here? Alone?" Her jaw tensed. "No." He blinked. "With someone?" She nodded. "With my son." Graham froze. "Your son?" "Yes." He opened his mouth, then closed it again. "How old?" She hesitated for a beat. 3. His heart thudded once, hard. He tried to keep his voice even. "Where is he now?" "In our quarters, watching cartoons." There was a sharpness in her tone now. Protective, measured. Graham's throat went dry. He didn't ask what he was thinking. He couldn't. Not yet. Later that night, he lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. 3 years. A son. She didn't say it directly, but the math, it wasn't complicated. The night they shared in the penthouse, it had stayed with him. He had buried that memory deep beneath product failures, lawsuits, and lonely nights. But it came rushing back now, sharper than before. Could the boy be his? Why didn't she tell him? Why now? The questions swallowed him whole. The next morning, he came downstairs early. The hallway was quiet. He saw a small pair of shoes near the east wing door. Blue Velcro sneakers. He stood there, frozen, staring at them. Then a soft voice broke his trance. "You shouldn't be here." Alondra. She stood just behind him, arms folded, eyes guarded. "I wasn't trying to intrude." She didn't answer. He pointed toward the shoes. "Is he?" "Yes." He waited. She didn't offer more. "I'd like to meet him." Alondra exhaled slowly, her shoulders tight. "Why?" The question hung between them. "Because." He struggled. "If he's mine." "You don't get to show up now and start asking questions," she cut in, voice low but firm. "You vanished, Graham. No calls, no contact. You didn't even leave a forwarding number. I didn't leave on purpose. Everything fell apart. I know, she said. I read about it. I saw the headlines, but that doesn't change the fact that I carried him alone, raised him alone, watched him grow alone. And I did it without asking anyone for anything. He looked at her, really looked. The pain in her face wasn't bitterness. It was weariness. You should have told me, he said, softer now. She shook her head. Would you have come back? The silence was deafening. He didn't know the answer. And she didn't push. Instead, she turned and walked away, leaving him standing there, surrounded by shadows of the past and the shoes of a child who might be his. Saturday morning moved slower than usual. Alondra had just finished loading towels into the hallway linen cabinet. Matteo was supposed to be in their quarters, working through a new coloring book she had picked up from the dollar store. She left the east wing door cracked, just a little, so she could listen for his voice. He'd been quiet that morning, sleepier than usual. She told herself he wouldn't wander. He never did. But today would be the exception. While she refolded the second shelf, Matteo pushed the door open and toddled down the hallway, chasing a small blue foam ball. It bounced once, then twice. Then it rolled through the arched entry of the main sitting room, where Graham was, seated on the couch, a cup of coffee in hand and a newspaper folded across his lap. He heard the soft pitter-patter of feet before he saw him. Then came the child. The boy. Small, fast, laughing. Matteo ran straight to the ball, picked it up, and turned. Graham froze. So did the child. They stared at each other. Grey eyes. Same shape, same flicker, same silence. Matteo tilted his head. You're not the cleaning man. Graham blinked, stunned by the voice. No, he said quietly. I live here. Matteo grinned. Mama cleans here. She does? Yep. She said I can't go past the hallway. But I followed the ball. It wasn't on purpose. Graham crouched slowly, unsure of what to do with the lump forming in his throat. You like balls? He asked. I have 3, Matteo said proudly. But this one is the bounciest. There was something about the boy's tone. Gentle, curious, open. He wasn't afraid. He wasn't guarded. He was just light. Graham smiled. What's your name? Matteo. But Mama calls me Tet. Tate, Graham repeated under his breath, the name sticking in his chest. Matteo took a step closer. Do you live with Mama too? No, I live here, but I didn't know Mama was here. Until recently. Matteo nodded, like it all made perfect sense. You look like me, he said suddenly. Graham's breath caught. You think so? Yeah. Your eyes are like mine. Mama says I got my eyes from someone important. Silence. Graham swallowed hard. She said that? Alondra's voice rang from the hallway. Matteo? Graham turned. She rushed into the room, breath tight, eyes locked on her son. Tay-Tay, I told you not to. She stopped short. Graham stood. Matteo held up the ball. I found it. Alondra's eyes darted from the ball to her son, to Graham's face. Graham met her stare without speaking. She stepped forward and took Matteo's hand. Time to go, baby. But I was just talking. Now, Matteo. The firmness in her voice silenced him. He frowned but nodded. Graham stepped closer. It's okay. He was just talking to me. She didn't answer. Just nodded and led Matteo away. Graham watched them go, his heart thundering in his chest. He had no proof, no confirmation, but he didn't need it. Those were his eyes, his silence, his same sideways glance when confused. The boy didn't have to say it. Graham already knew. Later that day, he waited in the courtyard, sipping lukewarm coffee, trying to quiet the noise in his head. Alondra found him on her way to the laundry wing. He looked up. You could have told me. She didn't flinch. And what would you have done? You were gone. I would have tried to come back. You didn't even say goodbye, Graham. He stood. Because everything fell apart. I lost everything. My business, my home. You still had your voice. Her words landed hard. You think I wanted to raise him alone? She asked. I cried every day for a month. I sat in silence wondering if you'd ever call. And then one day, I stopped waiting, because waiting was eating me alive. I didn't know, he whispered. I know. And now you do. They stood, facing each other, the air between them heavy and unspoken. He's amazing, Graham said, voice cracking. He's funny. Bright. Alondra softened, just a little. He's everything I never knew I needed. I want to be part of his life. She didn't answer immediately. I'm not trying to replace you, he added quickly, or disrupt what you built. I want to show up now. Alondra looked down. Her voice came low. Steady. You'll have to earn that, Graham. Not with me. With him. He nodded slowly. I will. Matteo hadn't stopped talking about the man with the soft voice since that morning. He said my name like it was important, he told Alondra, swinging his feet as he sat on the counter while she sliced apples. He listened when I talked about my animals. Not everyone does. He's got my eyes, right? Alondra didn't answer that last one. She kept her back turned, focused on the blade in her hand and the tightness in her chest. Graham had been quiet since that day. No pressure, no sudden requests, but his presence filled the estate like a slow-moving tide. He was everywhere and nowhere all at once. And Matteo had noticed. On Tuesday, Alondra walked past the courtyard to see Graham crouched beside Matteo, showing him how to plant a small herb in a terracotta pot. Do all seeds grow that fast? Matteo asked. No. Graham smiled. Some take longer, some need more time, more patience. Matteo nodded seriously. Like Mama's plants. She talks to them sometimes. Alondra paused at the window. She didn't interrupt. Didn't walk closer, but something curled in her chest. A question she didn't want to ask herself. What if he means it this time? That evening, Graham knocked on the doorframe of the east wing again. Alondra was folding laundry. Matteo was in the bath. You're getting good with him, she said without looking up. I'm trying to show up the right way, he replied. She nodded. Silence. I know I don't deserve ease, he added. But I'd like a real conversation. Alondra glanced up. Then start one. Graham stepped inside, staying near the doorway. I want to understand what you went through. I want to hear it. All of it. She blinked, surprised by the directness. So she told him. About the pregnancy, the tests, the fear, the silence. The moment she held Matteo and realized no one would be there to witness it but her. She didn't dramatize it. She didn't cry. She just told the truth, calmly, the way someone does when the pain has already been lived, survived, and filed into memory. Graham sat on the edge of the small table, elbows on knees, hands clasped. He didn't interrupt, didn't defend himself. He listened. When she finished, he said nothing. Not right away, then quietly. You're stronger than I've ever been. She didn't smile, but her shoulders loosened. For the first time, she believed he wasn't trying to erase the past, only understand it. The next afternoon, Matteo ran to the hallway, cheeks flushed. Mama, he said he can take me to the library. Alondra stepped out of the east wing with a towel in hand. Who said that? Him. Matteo pointed toward the door. Graham stepped forward, hands raised. I asked him if he liked books. He said yes. I offered to take him Saturday morning. I told him it was up to you. Alondra exhaled slowly. That's a big step. I'll stay in public spaces. I'll send you photos. Whatever makes you comfortable. She looked at Matteo. His eyes were bright. She turned back to Graham. 1 hour, no longer. And you bring him right back? Of course. Saturday came faster than she expected. Graham picked Matteo up at 10 a.m. sharp. Alondra watched through the window as he buckled her son into the back seat of a dark SUV, then circled to the driver's side and glanced once toward the house. She closed the curtain before their eyes could meet. They returned with 4 books, a new dinosaur pencil case, and stories about finger puppets and funny library signs. Matteo fell asleep halfway through lunch. Alondra tucked him in, then stepped back into the hallway, only to find Graham waiting near the stairs. "How'd I do?" he asked. "He's smiling." "That counts." Graham smiled, then shifted. "I'd like to take him to the park next week, if that's okay." She paused, then nodded. "Okay." The following week blurred by in small moments. Graham came around more often, always measured, never overstepping. He never asked to enter the East Wing, never imposed. But Matteo followed the sound of his voice, like birds follow light. They built block towers in the hallway, drew sea monsters on scrap paper, watched animal videos on the living room TV, while Graham explained the difference between whales and sharks. Alondra watched it all unfold with quiet tension. It was working, and that scared her more than if it hadn't. Friday afternoon, she found Graham in the kitchen, sleeves rolled, prepping dinner for the household staff. Something about sautéed chicken and a white wine glaze. She stood near the pantry door, arms crossed. "You cook now?" He glanced up, smirked. "Turns out I had to learn something after everything collapsed. Couldn't afford takeout for a while." She raised a brow. "And now?" "I still can't cook rice without burning it." A pause. Then laughter from both of them. Soft, tired, honest. The silence that followed wasn't cold. It was heavy, needed. He dried his hands with a kitchen towel, then turned to face her fully. "I need to ask you something," he said. She froze. He took a step closer. "I've respected your space. I haven't forced anything. But I can't keep pretending like I don't know. Graham, is Matteo mine?" The question didn't hit her like a blow. She'd been waiting for it, bracing, but it still landed in the center of her chest. Alondra inhaled, held it, then let it out slowly. Yes. No hesitation, no performance, just truth. Graham swallowed hard, like the word had weight. "Since when did you know?" The second I saw his eyes, he looked away for a moment, then turned back. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I tried," she said softly. "I called your office line 3 weeks after you disappeared. It was disconnected. I reached out to the agency. They said you left no forwarding contact. I didn't have your address, no family. You didn't leave me anything, Graham." His face twisted, not in anger, in guilt. "I thought you would have waited." "For how long?" she asked, her voice steady now. "I was scared, alone, pregnant, and barely affording prenatal vitamins. I didn't have time to chase a ghost." Graham didn't argue. He nodded. "Because she was right. I should have fought harder to stay connected," he said, "even when everything went wrong. I should have known better." She leaned against the counter, arms still folded, but her stance was softer now. "I didn't want him to grow up with half love, or half truths. I wasn't going to raise a child wondering why his father never showed up. And now?" "Now," she sighed. "He likes you. He talks about you when you're not around. He trusts you. And I can't let you vanish again." Graham stepped closer. "I won't. You say that now. I mean it now." She met his eyes, and she saw it. The man he used to be was still there, but quieter, slower, humbled. "You don't get to be part-time," she said. "I know. You don't get to try it out and walk away if it's too much. I'm not walking anywhere." Alondra hesitated, then said the words she'd never let herself believe until now. "He's your son." And just like that, Graham sat down. Not from shock, but from relief. Tears rimmed his eyes, though he didn't let them fall. "Thank you," he said, "for telling me, for raising him, for doing it alone." "I didn't do it for thanks," she replied. "I know. That's why you're the strongest person I know." A long pause. Then, "I want to be there," he said. "Not just for birthdays or library runs. I want to be his father. his real one. Not in name, in action. Alondra's voice dropped to a whisper. Then show up, every day. Not with gifts, not with promises, with presence. Graham nodded slowly. I can do that. Later that night, Graham knocked softly on the door to the east wing. Alondra opened it halfway. Can I say goodnight to him? She stepped aside. Matteo was already in bed, lights dimmed, snuggled beneath his dinosaur blanket. Graham sat on the edge of the bed. Hey, champ. Matteo blinked sleepily. Hi, you know how I said I live here? Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask, would it be okay if I spent more time with you? Like, as a grown-up who cares a lot. Matteo tilted his head. Like my family? Graham's eyes glistened. Yes, exactly. Matteo grinned. You already are. What would you do if someone you loved returned with a promise, but years too late? Could you trust them again? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if this chapter moved you, like the video, subscribe, and share it with someone who believes in second chances. Because sometimes, healing starts with a conversation we were never ready for. Until now. They sat across from each other at the small round table in the staff dining room. It was Saturday. Matteo was with Daniela in the city for the afternoon. The house was still, the kind of stillness that made the past hard to ignore. Alondra had a notebook in front of her, the pages lined with bullet points. Practical ones. Graham brought nothing but a pen and a willingness to listen. She tapped the notebook once. If you're serious about this, we need boundaries. I'm here for all of them, he said without flinching. Good. Then let's start. She flipped the page. No surprises, she said. No showing up unannounced to his school, to his appointments, or asking him things that change his routine. Understood. No correcting my parenting, unless it's safety-related. Agreed. And when he asks hard questions, like where you were or why you weren't around, you don't lie, but you don't make excuses either. Graham's eyes held hers. He deserves the truth. He deserves stability, she replied. He deserves parents who communicate, who don't drag him through unresolved tension. Graham nodded again, more slowly this time. I won't make this harder for you. I'm not worried about me, she said quietly. I'm worried about him. A pause. Then she closed the notebook. Okay, she said. That's the agreement. He exhaled, like he'd been holding his breath the whole time. Thank you for letting me in. I'm not letting you in, she corrected. I'm giving you the space to show up. There's a difference. That distinction mattered to her, and he understood it. The next few weeks fell into a new rhythm. Saturdays became Graham's day with Matteo. They did simple things. Library, park, grocery runs, chalk drawings in the driveway. Graham never tried to be flashy. Never bought Matteo loud toys or overcompensated with sugar. He asked questions. He listened. He made space. Alondra watched quietly from a distance. She'd peek through windows, fold clothes within earshot, sweep slowly just to stay close. She noticed the way Matteo lit up around him, the way Graham crouched to meet his eyes when talking, the way he never interrupted, even when Matteo went off on tangents about rainbow dinosaurs or magic sandwiches. The man who once disappeared now moved with intention. He showed up every time. No cancellations, no flaking, no excuses. It made her nervous, and it made her feel something she hadn't let herself feel in years. One evening, after dinner, Graham offered to do the dishes. Alondra leaned against the counter, sipping water, watching him rinse and scrub. He turned to her with a teasing smile. You know, when I first met you, I thought you were shy. I was focused, she replied, smirking. You barely said 10 words to me for 3 weeks. You weren't exactly a talker either. He laughed. Fair. A silence stretched between them, not awkward, just full. I used to think I had everything figured out, he said, still holding a damp plate. I had plans, metrics, milestones. And then you met me, she teased lightly. No. Then I lost everything. But yeah, meeting you, That changed the way I understood connection. Alondra's smile faltered slightly. I'm not looking for apologies, Graham. Or praise. I'm not offering either, he said gently. Just honesty. She nodded. Another pause. Then, have you ever wondered what would have happened if things had been different? He turned to face her fully. Every day. Her throat tightened. But wondering doesn't raise a child, she said. No, it doesn't. He placed the last plate in the rack and dried his hands. I'm not trying to rewrite the past, Alondra. I just want to build something good with what's left. She held his gaze for a long beat, then turned off the sink light and whispered, We'll see. Saturday mornings used to be for laundry, errands, and cleaning sticky fingerprints off the fridge. Now, they were for coffee, quiet, and watching from the window while Matteo and Graham played in the backyard. This morning was no different. Graham was crouched in the grass, letting Matteo bury his hands in the dirt. They were making what Matteo called a bug hotel, 3 stacked yogurt cups, a few sticks and tiny pebbles for the pretend lobby. Do bugs check in and get a room key? Graham asked, playfully serious. Obviously, Matteo replied, but the keys are invisible. Only bug eyes can see them. Graham laughed. Full, clear, warm. Alondra, standing behind the window curtain, felt it again. That tight pull beneath her ribs. It wasn't anxiety. It was the unfamiliar weight of feeling something for someone you once gave up on. Not romantic, not yet, but something she couldn't define. Later that afternoon, Matteo ran through the hallway with a paper crown on his head and a toilet paper roll scepter. Alondra raised an eyebrow. And what kingdom do you rule, Your Majesty? Matteo grinned. Dadland. The word knocked the wind out of her. She froze. He didn't notice. He darted down the hall again, giggling. Alondra slowly walked to the kitchen, where Graham was drying his hands. He called it Dadland, she said softly. Graham turned, blinking. He what? Just now. In the hallway, Graham's face shifted. Not in triumph, but something far gentler, almost reverent. I didn't teach him that, he said. I know, Alondra replied. They stood there in silence for a beat. I don't want to confuse him, she added. You're not. I'm not, he said. He's just giving language to what he feels. Alondra nodded slowly. That word means something. Graham nodded too. So I'll treat it like it does. The next few days passed with small steps. Graham helped with bedtime twice. Not by request, but by rhythm. He brought Matteo a nightlight in the shape of a tiger. No big speech. Just a gift placed on the dresser with a casual. Saw this and thought it looked like your drawings. Matteo screamed with excitement. Alondra watched from the doorway. It was the kind of gesture that didn't scream for attention. It just filled a gap that had always been there. That night, Matteo fell asleep faster than usual. Graham didn't linger, just helped tidy the books, picked up the tiny socks from the floor, and left. No words exchanged. But the air between him and Alondra didn't feel stiff anymore. Midweek, Mrs. Eaton pulled Alondra aside in the service hallway. I've seen a change in Mr. Maddox, she said. Alondra stiffened. Oh? Used to be all business. Short answers, empty fridge. No presents. She looked at Alondra, eyes sharp but not unkind. Now he laughs, keeps groceries in the house, walks slower. Alondra said nothing. I don't know what you are to him, Mrs. Eaton continued, but you're part of the reason he's acting like a man again. Alondra didn't know how to respond to that, so she nodded. Thank you. The compliment felt too heavy, like wearing someone else's coat. Still, it warmed her. Thursday evening, Graham offered to cook again, just for her. I figured you've been feeding everyone for 3 years, he said. Let someone return the favor. She hesitated, then gave a small nod. Dinner was simple. Grilled chicken, roasted vegetables, and warm flatbread with olive oil. But he plated it carefully, lit a candle without asking, and played soft jazz through the hallway speakers. They ate in the corner of the kitchen near the window. Alondra didn't speak for the first few minutes. Then, "You're different." Graham looked up. "I hope that's a good thing." "It is," she said, "but it makes it harder." He didn't ask her to explain. He waited. "I had finally gotten used to living without expecting anything," she said. "And now you're showing up. And Mateo's getting attached. And You're scared," he finished. She met his eyes. "Yes, I am too." That surprised her. "I've never had something worth showing up for before, and now that I do, I'm terrified of messing it up." She exhaled. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like she was carrying the full emotional load in the room. That night, after dinner, as Graham walked her to the east wing door, he didn't try to linger, didn't reach for her hand. But before she turned the knob, she glanced back. "You can come by tomorrow, after bedtime. I'll save you tea." He smiled. Small, slow. "Jasmine?" She nodded. "Then I'll be there." He came at 8:06 p.m. No text, no knocking, just a soft shuffle down the hallway, and then his silhouette in the doorway of the East Wing kitchen. Alondra already had the water boiling. The scent of jasmine had started to drift. She didn't say a word. Neither did he. She poured 2 cups, placed them on the small table by the window, and slid into the opposite seat. Outside, the air was still. The trees swayed gently. Somewhere nearby, the wind chimes rattled in low rhythm. They sipped. Quiet, comfortable, no tension. It had taken 3 years, but here they were. 2 cups, 2 people, 2 histories no longer at war with each other. Alondra finally spoke. "You don't push." Graham looked up. "I promised I wouldn't." "That matters." "I know." She watched him for a second. "You were different when I first met you." He chuckled. "You mean cold?" "I mean untouchable." He nodded. "Yeah, I was like that. Thought control was strength. Turns out, it was just fear in a better suit." Her brows lifted slightly. "That's a good line," she said. "I've had a lot of time to rewrite old stories." A beat of silence. Alondra swirled her tea. "Have you rewritten ours?" Graham met her gaze. "No, I'm still living it." Her stomach flipped, not from nerves, from the weight of being seen. The visits became more regular. Once a week turned into twice, then 3 times. Always after Mateo was asleep, always with tea. Sometimes they talked about the past, cautiously, like walking across a frozen pond. Other times, they just sat. No pressure, no expectations. One Thursday night, she told him about the first time Mateo had a fever, how she stayed up all night with a cold rag and panic in her throat, how she paced the hallway whispering prayers while his forehead burned. Graham didn't interrupt. He only reached out and gently placed his hand over hers. She didn't pull away. Not that night. Not anymore. One evening, he brought her a small black notebook. "What's this?" "Empty pages," he said. "For your plans, the ones you put away." She opened it. The pages were clean, crisp. "I don't even know where to start." "Then write that." She stared down at it. He never kissed her. Not once. Not even when they brushed shoulders washing dishes. Not even when she laughed too hard and leaned into him slightly. Not even when they locked eyes after a long, deep silence. He didn't rush it. And that made her trust him more. One night, Mateo woke up crying from a dream. Alondra rushed in, but Graham was already by the bed, crouched low. "I got him," he whispered. Mateo clung to him, tears streaking his face. "I dreamt I lost Mama," he said between sobs. Graham held him tighter. "She's right here, and I'm right here. We've got you." Mateo looked up, still sleepy. "Are you my real dad?" Alondra inhaled sharply from the doorway. Graham didn't freeze. He didn't panic. He just nodded slowly. "Yes, I am. Forever? As long as you want me to be." Mateo wiped his face with the back of his hand. "Then Don't go anywhere. I won't. Alondra turned away, her hand pressed to her chest. Something warm cracked open inside her. The next morning, Graham stayed for breakfast. Alondra made pancakes. Matteo demanded a tiger-shaped one. Graham tried and failed. They all laughed when it looked more like a turtle. She hadn't laughed like that in years. Later, Graham took the plates to the sink, and Matteo curled up on the couch with a blanket. Alondra leaned in the doorway, watching them both. And, without realizing it, she whispered, "I'm not scared anymore." Graham looked over his shoulder. Of what? Letting you in. It wasn't supposed to be a big deal. Just dinner. Just the three of them. Matteo had asked for it. He wanted to eat outside like people in the cartoons. So, Graham set up the table under the pergola, brought out the string lights he found in the storage closet, hung them along the wooden beams. They cast a soft golden hue across the yard. Alondra cooked. Graham grilled. Matteo danced barefoot in the grass. The food was simple. Rice, roasted chicken. Roasted corn on the cob that Matteo called dragon teeth. Alondra hadn't felt this light in years. No looming questions, no unsaid words. Just peace and presence. They ate slowly. Matteo giggled mid-bite when Graham accidentally dropped a spoon. "You're lucky this isn't a restaurant," Alondra teased, smiling. "Hey, you get what you pay for," Graham replied. Matteo grinned. "I paid with hugs." Alondra laughed. A sound that made Graham pause mid-chew. That laugh. It had lived in his memory longer than he realized. And now it was here again, real, close. After dinner, Matteo fell asleep in the lawn chair with a blanket tucked around him. Alondra stood and gently scooped him into her arms, resting his head against her shoulder. "I'll be back," she whispered. Graham nodded and cleared the plates while she carried their son inside. When she returned, the lights were dimmer, the night air cooler. But Graham was still there, seated, quiet, sipping tea with both hands wrapped around the cup. She sat across from him. Neither spoke for a while. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of everything they weren't rushing to say. Finally, Graham looked up. "I missed this." Alondra tilted her head slightly. "This? You. Him. This life." She didn't speak. He set down the cup. "I know I don't deserve to pick up where I left off. I know I broke a part of your world when I disappeared. But sitting here, watching Matteo fall asleep like he trusts the world around him, I don't want to leave that again." Alondra stared at him. "I'm not asking you to..." He blinked. "You're not?" She leaned forward slightly. "I'm asking you to stay, but not just physically." She swallowed. "I need presence, consistency, patience." He nodded slowly. "I can give you that." She reached for her cup, sipped, then said softly, "I'm still healing, Graham. I know, and some parts of me might always be careful. I want to meet those parts too." Her chest tightened at that. "You sure?" He smiled. "I'm still here, aren't I?" They sat quietly again. Then he reached across the table, slowly, giving her time. She didn't flinch. Their fingers met. Just that. No kiss, no fireworks, just two hands finally resting where they belonged. "I don't want to rush this," she said. "You're leading the pace. Slow. Then slow it is." That night, when they stood, Alondra walked ahead. At the door to the east wing, she turned. Graham stood behind her, hands in his pockets, shoulders steady. She didn't invite him in, but she didn't need to. She looked into his eyes, searching for anything that might feel like a lie. There was nothing, only stillness, only truth. "Good night," she whispered. "Good night." He turned and walked down the hallway, didn't look back. He didn't have to. She was still there, and she wasn't going anywhere. Graham didn't move back into the main house. He didn't ask to, and Alondra didn't offer. But each morning he showed up. He'd knock softly on the back door, just as she finished packing Matteo's lunch. Same time, same rhythm. No fanfare. Morning, he'd say. Coffee? She'd offer. He always said yes. They sat across from each other at the small kitchen table, the one she'd thrifted when she first moved in. Matteo would come running in minutes later, hair wild, shoes on the wrong feet, ready to race to preschool. Some mornings, Graham drove him. Some mornings, they walked. Matteo didn't care which. He just liked when Graham was there. And Alondra was learning to like it too. Not because of what Graham said, but because of what he didn't. He didn't push, didn't pry, didn't pretend. He was simply present, and in a world that had given her so many disappearing acts, presence felt sacred. On a quiet Thursday, Alondra fell sick. Low fever, chills, too many hours working, and too few resting. She tucked Matteo into bed early, curled up on the couch, and closed her eyes. When she opened them again, Graham was in the kitchen, washing dishes. She blinked. "How did you—" "You left the door open," she groaned softly. "You didn't have to come all the way over." "I didn't." Matteo called. She sat up slowly. "He did?" "Yeah. I gave him a little emergency phone. Told him to use it only if something wasn't right." She blinked again, touched. "You gave my son a phone?" "Not a real one. A kid's version. Pre-programmed to my number." She couldn't speak. Graham walked over, placing a warm bowl in her lap. "Chicken soup. It's not fancy." She took the spoon and smiled. "Doesn't need to be." They sat together in the glow of the hallway light. No questions, no explanations. Just a man who remembered what she needed before she could even ask. Saturday afternoons became library time. Matteo loved story hour. Alondra loved the quiet. And Graham, he liked watching them both. He'd trail a few steps behind as Alondra held Matteo's hand, the little boy chattering about knights and spaceships. Once inside, Matteo would dart off to the kids section and Alondra would browse the parenting shelves. Graham never interrupted. He sat in the corner, reading business books he never finished, occasionally glancing up. She noticed, of course, and once, just once, she met his gaze and didn't look away. He smiled softly. She returned it. That was enough. Evenings were slow. Sometimes Graham cooked. Other times Alondra did. Once, Matteo insisted on helping and nearly set a napkin on fire. They laughed so hard they forgot about dessert. Little by little, the edges between their lives softened. They didn't label anything, no declarations, no rehearsed promises. But the feeling was there. In the grocery runs, in the movie nights. In the way Graham left small sticky notes on the fridge, "Don't forget your umbrella." "Matteo's library card is in the blue bag." "You're doing great." It wasn't romance yet, but it was care. And sometimes that mattered more. One evening, after Matteo had gone to bed, Graham stayed a little longer. They sat on the back porch. The night air was cool. Crickets hummed. A lone train passed in the distance. Alondra sipped warm tea. Graham said nothing at first. Then, quietly, "Can I ask you something?" She looked over. "Sure. What's the hardest part?" She didn't pretend not to understand. Of raising him alone? He nodded. She exhaled, being the only one who remembers everything. He tilted his head. The first smile. The first time he said, "Mama," the day he stopped needing the bottle. Her voice cracked a little. "I was the only one who saw it, who celebrated it, who worried about it." Graham's expression didn't change, but his eyes did. They softened. "I missed so much," he said. She nodded. "You did." Silence. Then she added, "But you're here now. That counts for something." He didn't reach for her, didn't ask to stay the night. But when he stood to leave, she followed him to the door. She looked up at him, the porch light casting soft shadows. "Thanks," she said. "For what?" "For not rushing me." He nodded. "I know better now." She didn't move. Then, after a long pause, "You can come by tomorrow," she said. "For breakfast?" She smiled faintly. "For pancakes." He chuckled. I'll bring strawberries. Bring syrup too. He grinned. Got it. She closed the door gently after he left, and for the first time in years, she leaned against it with a full heart. Not because he loved her, but because this time he was choosing her with patience, and she was choosing herself with peace. Alondra used to measure men by grand gestures. The surprise flowers, the weekend getaways, the whispered promises under dim lights. But none of those things raised her son when she was tired. None of them held her steady when the nights got long and the bills piled up. What mattered now was something smaller, firmer, like how Graham always arrived 5 minutes early, how he never left without taking out the trash or checking the pantry for Mateo's favorite cereal. It was in the quiet things, like when he learned to braid Mateo's hair for school spirit day, fumbling at first, then getting it right on the third try. Or how he started carrying a folder of all Mateo's school notices, sorted and color-coded. The Graham she once loved had swagger. The Graham she was learning to love now had presence. There was a difference, and it mattered. One Monday morning, Alondra was running late. Mateo had spilled juice on his shirt, and she couldn't find her phone charger. Stress crawled up her neck, but when she opened the front door, Graham was already there. Keys in hand, spare charger, fresh shirt for Mateo, breakfast sandwiches wrapped in foil. How? He shrugged. I figured it was one of those mornings. She stared at him. Do you keep a sixth sense for chaos now? He smirked. Only when it involves my family. The word hung in the air. Family. She didn't flinch, didn't correct him, didn't run. That was new. Later that week, during Mateo's parent-teacher conference, Alondra walked in to see Graham already seated next to the teacher. He'd taken notes. He asked questions. He thanked the teacher for her patience with Mateo's endless dinosaur facts. And when they walked out, he handed Alondra the summary sheet. I know you're busy. Thought you'd want this before bedtime. She took it slowly. Graham. He didn't push. He just smiled. You're not doing this alone anymore. She nodded. I know. Saturday night was game night. Mateo chose Connect 4. They played best of 5. Graham let Mateo win the first 2. Alondra won the third. The fourth ended in a tie because someone accidentally kicked the board. The fifth, Mateo won fair and square. He did a little dance that had all of them laughing. And when it was bedtime, Graham offered to read. Alondra watched from the doorway. Graham sat on the edge of the bed, voice low, animated. Mateo clung to every word. When the story ended, Graham tucked the covers gently under Mateo's chin. I'll be here tomorrow, he whispered. Mateo mumbled, Okay, Daddy. Alondra froze. It was the first time he'd used the word. Graham's eyes flicked up. Alondra didn't correct her son, didn't explain anything away. She simply stepped into the room, pressed a kiss to Mateo's forehead, then walked out. When Graham joined her in the kitchen, she handed him a glass of water. Neither of them said a word, but the silence was warm, shared, safe. The next morning, they went to the park. Mateo rode his bike in circles, shrieking with joy. Graham watched him, then turned to Alondra. I've been thinking, he said. She kept her eyes on her son. About the business. She glanced at him. I stepped away, temporarily. She blinked. You did? He nodded. I've been running so fast for so long, I didn't realize how much I was missing. A long pause. I want more time with Mateo. With you. Alondra crossed her arms, cautious. I'm not asking to move in. I'm not rushing anything. I'm just saying, this feels right. She said nothing. He added, I'll follow your pace. Another long pause. Then Alondra looked up. Okay. His brows lifted slightly. Okay? You're here. You're showing up. That counts more than a job title. They walked together, slowly. Mateo waved from the swings. Graham waved back, smiling like it was the best part of his day. Maybe it was. At home, they had dinner. Graham offered to stay for dishes. Alondra let him. He rolled up his sleeves and got to work. humming quietly. She leaned against the counter, watching. It wasn't sexy. It wasn't poetic. It was real. It was grounded. It was a man, changed not by speeches, but by accountability. By time, by choice. She walked over, dried the last dish beside him. Their shoulders touched, their fingers brushed, and for once, she didn't pull away. That night, after Matteo had gone to sleep, Graham lingered at the door. He didn't push for more, didn't reach in, but before he left, he said something simple. I like the man I'm becoming around you. Alondra met his eyes. I like him too. Then she closed the door with a steady hand, and stood behind it with a steady heart. This time, it wasn't about the chase. It was about the keeping, and Graham was proving, day by day, he was here to stay. Alondra didn't believe in fairy tales anymore. She believed in mornings like this. Her slippers shuffled against the kitchen tile as the smell of pancakes drifted through the apartment. Matteo's soft giggles filtered in from the living room. Graham was trying, and mostly failing, to master Saturday cartoons and syrup without a disaster. But he was here, and that, more than anything, was the miracle. Not a grand apology, not a diamond ring, just presence. Consistency. Effort. She took a deep breath and leaned in the doorway, watching Graham balance a sticky plate and a stack of napkins while Matteo danced beside him. 2 pancakes, coming in hot, Graham said, lifting the plate like it was a pizza tray. Daddy, you forgot the strawberries. I would never, Graham replied with a grin, pulling a container from the fridge with a flourish. Alondra smiled. She didn't interrupt. She didn't need to. This was their rhythm now. Later that morning, after breakfast and clean-up, Graham motioned for her to join him on the balcony. Matteo was busy building a pillow fort in the living room, completely consumed. Alondra followed him outside, her arms folded, more out of habit than fear. It was quiet. Graham leaned on the railing, looking out at the city. I had a conversation with my father last night, he said. That caught her attention. Really? He nodded. Told him I'm not coming back to the board. Not now. Maybe not ever. Alondra blinked. You love that company. I thought I did. But it doesn't love me back. Not the way this does. He turned to her. This, he gestured toward the apartment, feels like something I'm building, not inheriting. She said nothing at first. Just let the words settle. Then she asked quietly, Are you sure about all of it? He looked her dead in the eye. I've never been more sure. That night, after Matteo had gone to bed, they sat on the couch, a movie playing softly in the background. Neither of them was watching it. Alondra's legs were curled beneath her. Graham sat beside her, not touching, just near. I used to think love had to be loud, she said quietly. Big gestures, grand returns. He waited. I used to dream about the moment you'd come back, what you'd say, what I'd scream, what we'd fix. Graham's jaw tightened. But now, I think love looks like this. She looked over at him. It's in the groceries you pick up without asking, the way you fold Matteo's hoodies, the way you don't rush me anymore. A beat, the way you waited for me to catch up, even when I didn't know I wanted to. Graham didn't speak right away. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled something small, a key, to her apartment. He placed it on the coffee table. No pressure, no ceremony, just a symbol. You don't have to give me one back, he said. Not yet, or ever. But if you ever want me to let myself in, I'd be honored. Alondra stared at it, then at him. She didn't pick it up, but she didn't slide it away either. Instead, she leaned her head gently on his shoulder. He exhaled, soft, safe. Steady. The next morning, Matteo came barreling in with wild hair and stuffed animals in both arms. Movie day. Graham groaned dramatically. Again? Yes! Alondra rolled her eyes with a smile. You know the drill. Pancakes, chores, then movies. Matteo turned to Graham. Let's go, Daddy. The word still made Graham pause. He never corrected it, never claimed it, but he earned it. And Alondra saw the way it softened him each time. This wasn't pretend. This was becoming. That afternoon they all sat on the floor with popcorn bowls and juice boxes. The credits rolled on the second animated feature, and Matteo was already dozing off. Graham lifted the boy gently and carried him to bed. When he returned, Alondra was folding blankets. "I used to be afraid of you," she said suddenly. He stopped. "Not in the way you might think, but afraid of how much you knew me, of how much I let you know." She turned to face him. "But now I'm realizing, you weren't the one I needed to guard against." Graham stepped closer. "I was protecting myself from what it meant to let someone love me. After the damage." He didn't reach for her. He didn't crowd. He just stood there. "I love you, Alondra. Not for who you were when I left, but for who you are now. Even if I have to keep earning my place in your life every single day." Her voice didn't shake. "I want you to—" They didn't kiss. Not yet. They didn't need to. But the space between them closed. Naturally. Completely. Graham stayed late that night. Did the dishes, checked on Matteo once more, wrote a note, and left it on the fridge. "There's no place I'd rather be." Alondra read it 3 times before heading to bed. Then she picked up the spare key from the table and slid it into the drawer by the door. Not because she didn't want him to have it, but because she knew he'd keep showing up, key or not. 3 weeks later, the apartment felt different. Not louder, not messier, but fuller. A second toothbrush, a navy jacket on the coat rack, a new cereal box in the cabinet. One Matteo swore Graham had better not eat. Alondra hadn't said yes. Not to a ring, not to moving in, not to titles. But she hadn't said no either. They were something honest, something that didn't require defining every second of the day. This time, she wasn't rushing it. She was watching it grow. On a Sunday morning, they went to the park. Graham held the kite string while Matteo darted across the grass in squeaky sneakers. Alondra sat on a bench with her coffee, smiling softly. A couple walked by, their baby wrapped in a sling on the father's chest. "You guys make a beautiful family," the woman said. Alondra nodded politely, unsure what to say. Graham looked over. He didn't say anything either. But when Matteo called, "Mom, Dad, look," they both answered without hesitation. It wasn't about fitting a label. It was about feeling true. That evening, they ordered takeout and watched reruns of a game show Graham pretended to be too cool to enjoy. Matteo begged to sleep in Graham's room. Alondra blinked. "His room?" Graham shrugged, pretending he didn't care. "He calls the guest room mine now." Alondra didn't correct her son. She didn't need to. After tucking Matteo in, she lingered at the bedroom door. Watched Graham pull the comforter up to Matteo's chin and whisper something in his ear. He turned and caught her watching. "Hey," he said. "Hey." Silence. Then she said it. "Stay." He did. That night was different from all the others. No fireworks, no scripted lines, just her hand finding his in the dark. No hesitation this time. No pain tucked behind every kiss. Just breath. Just warmth. And this time, she believed it. The next morning, she woke before him. She made coffee, toasted bread, packed Matteo's lunch. She didn't need him to see it all. But he did. He stepped into the kitchen barefoot, hair a mess, voice husky. "You're a miracle," he said. She laughed. "I'm just a mom." "No. You're the reason I even know what peace looks like." She paused. Then she said something she hadn't said in a long, long time. "I'm happy." He kissed her forehead. "Let's protect that." Weeks turned to months. Graham took a small consulting role with a green housing startup. Less prestige, more purpose. Alondra's non-profit received a new grant. She hired 2 part-time aides. Matteo learned how to tie his shoes, badly but proudly. They went to therapy, together and apart. They had arguments, real ones, but they didn't break apart. They held on. They learned how to speak, how to listen, how to unearn. On the anniversary of the day he first left, they didn't mention it. They went to a fair with Matteo instead, rode the carousel, shared a funnel cake. At night, they sat on the roof of the building, looking out over the lights. "You never told me what made you come back," she said. Graham exhaled. "I heard Matteo say your name." "What?" "That day, at the cafe. He pointed at you and said, 'That's Mummy.'" He paused. "I think he recognized you before I was ready to—" She swallowed hard. "Thank you for coming back," she whispered. He turned toward her. "I didn't come back to fix us. I came back because I knew I couldn't start over anywhere else." Her eyes welled, not because of the words, but because she finally believed every one of them. Some nights were hard. He still had flashbacks of losing control, of walking out. She still had moments where her chest would tighten without warning. But they had tools now. They had each other. They had Matteo, and they had quiet. Not emptiness, peace. One rainy evening, Graham stood in the hallway outside Alondra's bedroom door. He wasn't moving in, not officially, but his bag stayed longer each week. He knocked softly before opening. She was brushing her hair, wearing the oversized hoodie he kept accidentally leaving behind. He leaned in the doorway. "I've been thinking," he said. "Dangerous." He smirked. "I want to marry you." Alondra froze. He continued. "Not to start over. Not to pretend we never broke. But because we're building something better now." He didn't drop to one knee, didn't pull out a box, just stood there, raw and real. Her voice was quiet. "I'm not ready for the ceremony, or the vows, or the guest list. That's okay, but I'm ready to keep waking up next to you." He smiled. "Then that's everything." They didn't call it an engagement. They didn't post about it online. But the next day, he gave her a simple gold ring. No diamond, just a symbol. She wore it on a chain around her neck, right next to Matteo's kindergarten class photo. Months later, when they stood at the community garden ribbon cutting, Alondra gave the speech. "This space is about second chances," she said. She looked out into the crowd and met Graham's eyes. Because healing doesn't mean returning to who you were. It means growing into who you were always meant to be. That night, back at home, she slipped the chain from her neck and handed it to him. He looked confused. "Hold it," she said. "Just for tonight." He did, and later, when they turned out the lights and he reached for her hand, she met it halfway. Not broken, not waiting, just whole and ready. If this story touched you, if it reminded you that love doesn't have to be loud to be real, then don't keep it to yourself. Like this video, share your thoughts in the comments. Tell a friend who needs this reminder, and subscribe to Mr. Charles Stories for more life-changing, heart-healing stories just like this. Thank you for being here. Your time matters.